A car sits in a snowbank. The headlights are still on. The engine is still running. Inside, there's a bottle of wine, a bag of clothes, a laptop with the screen cracked. Everything Maura Murray owned in that moment is still in that car. Maura Murray is not. A man stops his bus to check on her. She tells him she's already called for help. She hasn't. 7 minutes later, police arrive. She's gone. Vanished from a snow-covered road in rural New Hampshire in the middle of winter, with no footprints leading away, no struggle, and no explanation that has ever been confirmed in over 20 years. This is the disappearance of Maura Murray. It was February 9th, 2004. Maura was 21 years old, a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. By every account from the people who knew her, she was driven, intelligent, and under enormous pressure. She had recently failed several exams. She was a competitive athlete on the school's track team. She had a boyfriend in the army. And in the days before she disappeared, something in her life had visibly shifted. On the morning of February 9th, Maura sent an email to her professors and her track coach. She told them she would be away from campus for about a week. A family emergency, she said. There was no family emergency. Nobody in her family had asked her to come home. Nobody knew what she meant. She withdrew over $200 in cash. She bought alcohol despite being underage. She packed a bag. She got in her car, a black Saturn sedan, and started driving north. Not toward her family in Massachusetts. North, into New Hampshire, toward the White Mountains, a direction that made no immediate sense to anyone who later tried to reconstruct her movements. Before leaving campus, Maura was involved in a minor car accident in a campus parking lot. She clipped another vehicle. She left a note, but didn't report it through proper channels in a way that satisfied the other driver, and there was at least a possibility that this incident, however small, was weighing on her as she drove. By early evening, snow was falling across northern New Hampshire. Maura was driving along Route 112 in the town of Haverhill, a rural stretch of road, sparse, mostly forest, the kind of place where a car can travel for miles without passing another vehicle. At approximately 7:27 p.m., her car left the road and crashed into a snowbank. A nearby resident heard the impact. Minutes later, a school bus driver named Butch Atwood happened to be passing and stopped to check on her. This is the most important documented interaction of the entire case, possibly the last confirmed conversation Maura Murray ever had. Atwood would later describe her as shaken but not seriously injured. He offered to call for help. Maura told him she had already contacted AAA, roadside assistance, and that help was on the way. Records would later confirm that no such call was ever made. Atwood, satisfied that she had things handled, drove the short distance home and called the police himself at 7:42 p.m., just to make sure someone was aware of the accident, even though Maura had told him not to worry about it. That gap, between when Atwood left and when police arrived, has become the most analyzed window of time in the entire case. Police arrived at the scene at approximately 7:46 p.m., less than 10 minutes after Atwood's call, less than 20 minutes after the crash itself. Maura Murray was gone. Her car was still there. The engine was running. The headlights were on. Inside, officers found her belongings: a school bag, a laptop with a cracked screen, alcohol, and a partially consumed bottle of wine. Her purse and identification were also in the vehicle. She had not walked away carrying her essentials. She had left almost everything behind. There were no footprints leading away from the car in the snow that made sense as a clear trail. The temperature that night was below freezing. The nearest town with any real population was miles away, and somewhere in that brief window, less than 20 minutes, in a remote, snow-covered, sparsely populated stretch of rural New Hampshire, Maura Murray disappeared. The investigation that followed was extensive. Search dogs were brought in. The surrounding woods were combed repeatedly. Local volunteers, police, and eventually the FBI all participated in searches across the area in the weeks and months that followed. Nothing was found. No body, no clothing, no definitive physical trace. As investigators worked to understand what had happened, two competing pictures of Maura began to emerge, and to this day, the case essentially lives in the gap between them. The first picture is of a young woman in crisis, failing exams. unexplained absences from campus, a fabricated story to her professors about a family emergency, a minor car accident she hadn't properly resolved, withdrawn cash, purchased alcohol despite being underage. Some who have studied the case believe Maura was planning to disappear voluntarily, to walk away from a life that had become overwhelming and start over somewhere else under her own choosing. If that theory is correct, the crash on Route 112 was simply an unplanned complication in a journey Maura intended to make alone. And what happened after Atwood drove away was a decision she made on her own, to walk into the dark, away from the road, away from her old life, and never look back. The second picture is darker and far more disturbing. Maura was last seen, by Atwood's account, near a remote and sparsely populated stretch of road at night, in winter, alone, having just survived a car accident that left her shaken. If someone else came upon her in that window, before police arrived, in those critical, unaccounted-for minutes, there would have been no witnesses, no traffic cameras, nothing to record what happened next. Investigators have, over the years, looked closely at individuals in the surrounding area. Some theories point to people who lived or worked near the crash site that night. None of these leads have ever resulted in an arrest, a named suspect, or any conclusive evidence connecting a specific person to Maura's disappearance. Both theories, voluntary disappearance and abduction, have persisted for over 2 decades, largely because neither one fully fits the available evidence, and neither one has ever been disproven. What makes Maura Murray's case different from many disappearances is the sheer volume of attention it has received. Long before true crime podcasts and YouTube channels became a dominant form of media, Maura's case was already being dissected, frame by frame, theory by theory, on internet forums in the mid-2000s. It became one of the first major missing person cases to be shaped almost entirely by online amateur investigation. Years before that became a common phenomenon. That attention has been, in many ways, a double-edged sword. It has kept Maura's name and story alive for over 20 years, generating tips, theories, and public pressure that less publicized cases simply never receive. But it has also generated an enormous amount of noise, rumors, unverified claims, and theories presented online with a confidence that often outpaces the actual evidence behind them. Maura's family, particularly her sister, Julie Murray, has spent years trying to separate genuine investigative progress from internet speculation while continuing to push New Hampshire authorities for real answers. That pressure appears to be producing something new. In recent statements, New Hampshire's Cold Case Unit has confirmed that Maura Murray's case is being actively worked using investigative tools that did not exist in 2004. Officials have specifically referenced the use of advanced forensic and analytical techniques being applied to existing evidence and new information as it surfaces. Among the tools now being used is something called LiDAR, a remote sensing technology capable of detecting subtle abnormalities in terrain that would be invisible to a conventional ground search. It can reveal disturbances in soil, vegetation, and landscape that might indicate something buried or disturbed years ago in ways that human eyes simply cannot detect from the surface. Facial recognition technology has also reportedly been applied to the case, potentially useful for analyzing old photographs, surveillance footage, or comparing images that might connect to Maura's case in ways investigators in 2004 had no ability to explore. The significance of this is not that a breakthrough has been announced. It hasn't. No remains have been found. No new suspect has been named. The significance is that, more than 20 years later, the state of New Hampshire still considers this an active, working investigation. Not a closed file gathering dust, but a case being approached with tools that simply did not exist when Maura disappeared. The New Hampshire Cold Case Unit has expanded specifically to support ongoing work on cases like this one, moving from a single part-time investigator to 2 full-time investigators, a change driven in part by sustained public pressure from the Murray family and advocacy organizations supporting other families of missing persons. Maura Murray would be in her early 40s today. She would have potentially finished her nursing career, built a life, perhaps had a family of her own. 21 years of a future that, for her family, has only ever existed as a question mark. Julie Murray has spent more than 2 decades fighting to keep her sister's case from becoming one more cold file in a drawer. She has said, in public statements, that her family has waited 21 years for answers, and that they are not alone. That too many families carry the same unbearable weight while hearing too little from investigators. That sentiment is, in many ways, the heart of why Maura Murray's case continues to resonate so strongly more than 2 decades later. It is not just the mystery of what happened on that snow-covered road in 2004. It is the mystery of how someone can vanish so completely, in such a short window of time, in a place that should have made disappearing nearly impossible. And how, 21 years later, modern technology is only now beginning to look at that same patch of New Hampshire wilderness with tools capable of seeing what human eyes never could. Somewhere in the analysis of old terrain data, old evidence, and new technology, investigators are hoping to find what 2 decades of searches on foot never could. Whether that search finally produces an answer remains, as of now, unknown. Maura Murray's case remains open. It remains unsolved. And somewhere, in the gap between a car accident and a police arrival that took less than 20 minutes, the answer to one of America's most enduring missing person mysteries is still waiting to be found. This case remains unsolved to this day. If you enjoy real disappearances, unexplained mysteries, and true crime investigations based on actual events, subscribe to the Crime Vault and join us for the next case. There are details about this case that investigators and amateur researchers alike keep returning to year after year because they don't fit cleanly into either theory. The first is the phone call that never happened. Maura told Butch Atwood she had already called AAA for roadside assistance. This wasn't a vague claim. It was specific enough that Atwood believed her completely and left the scene without a second thought. But phone records later confirmed no such call was made from her cell phone that night. If she lied to him, the question becomes why. Was she trying to get him to leave so she could do something on her own? Walk away, meet someone, simply be alone? Or had something already happened to her phone, her plans, her state of mind that made the lie almost automatic, a way of buying herself time without fully understanding why she needed it? The second detail is the missing window of time itself. 16 minutes, by most reconstructions, separates Atwood driving away and police arriving at the scene. 16 minutes is not a long time. It is roughly the length of time it takes to walk a mile at a brisk pace in clear conditions. Far less in deep snow, at night, in winter clothing not suited for a long walk. For Maura to have traveled any meaningful distance on foot in that window, especially in the snow, would have required real urgency and a very specific destination in mind. Searchers combing the surrounding woods in the days and weeks after her disappearance found nothing. No clear trail, no abandoned items, nothing that confirmed she had walked into the tree line at all. The third detail is the email to her professors. Maura's message about a family emergency was specific enough to explain a week-long absence, but vague enough to raise no immediate alarm. Whoever wrote it understood exactly how much detail was needed to be believed without inviting questions. That level of premeditation, deciding in advance exactly what story to tell and to whom, suggests Maura was planning something. The question that has never been answered is whether that something was a new chapter of her own choosing, or whether she sensed danger she couldn't fully name and was, in her own way, trying to protect the people closest to her from worry while she handled something on her own. Investigators who have spent years on cases like this one often describe a particular kind of frustration that doesn't apply to most criminal investigations. There is no body to examine, no definitive crime scene beyond a car in a snowbank, no physical evidence pointing decisively toward foul play or voluntary departure. What exists instead is a collection of small, human details. A fabricated excuse, an unmade phone call, a short walk into the woods or into a stranger's car or into nothing at all, that have to be weighed against each other without ever reaching certainty. That uncertainty is, in many ways, harder for families to live with than confirmed tragedy. A confirmed death, however devastating, eventually allows for grief to take its natural course. An unresolved disappearance offers no such permission. Julie Murray has spoken about this directly, about the particular weight of not knowing, of holding open the possibility that her sister is alive somewhere, while also carrying the quiet, unspoken fear that she is not, and that the truth has simply been buried by time, weather, and 21 years of New Hampshire winters. The renewed investigative effort. The LiDAR scans, the facial recognition technology, the expansion of New Hampshire's cold case unit represents something that didn't exist for most of the years this case has been open. An active, technologically modern attempt to look again at evidence and terrain that human searchers may have walked past without realizing what was beneath their feet. LiDAR works by sending out rapid pulses of laser light and measuring how long they take to return, building an extraordinarily precise map of terrain, capable of detecting subtle disturbances in soil or vegetation that would be invisible to someone walking through the same area, even an experienced search team. In wooded, hilly terrain like the area surrounding Route 112 in Haverhill, this kind of technology can identify exactly the sort of small, easily overlooked anomalies that 2 decades of conventional ground searches might have missed entirely. Whether this renewed effort produces an answer is something only time will tell, but its existence confirms something important: that Maura Murray's case has never actually gone cold in the eyes of the people responsible for solving it, even during the years when public attention waned and the file seemed, from the outside, to have gone quiet. Maura Murray vanished in less time than it takes to watch a single television commercial break, somewhere between a school bus driver's headlights disappearing down a snow-covered road and the arrival of police only minutes later. 21 years later, that gap remains the single most important window of time in modern American missing person history, and no one, not her family, not investigators, not the thousands of amateur researchers who have spent 2 decades studying every detail of that night, has ever been able to say with certainty what happened inside it.